Well, good morning and welcome into the Farzy Show, everybody. Marc Farzetta with you here at the Steven Singer Studios. What a weekend. I had my first game that I went to in forever since pandemic started. I'll update you on that. I'll let you know what my experience was like at the Wells Fargo Center. I'll let you know what my experience was like watching Philadelphia sports over the weekend, watching the NFL draft over the weekend, and the half-assed fist bump that was heard around the world. Man, we really needed something to talk about, but we got even more to talk about now. So we'll get into the draft. We'll get into the 76ers weekend. We'll get into the Phillies weekend with a couple of really, really awful, horrible, horrendously awful calls that did not go the Phillies' way, unfortunately. We'll get into that. And then we'll also have some fun with some things that will happen outside the world of sports of Philadelphia and continue to kick things around in that regard. But let's start it off last night with the Phillies, shall we? I want to get to this because I know it's the pressing issue that happened just last night. You guys have had a lot of time to already dissect what's happened in the NFL draft and what the Eagles did, and we'll certainly talk mostly about that when Dave Zangaro joins us coming up in about 20 minutes or so on the program on our Zatos Investments guest line. But Rhys Hoskins hits a 3-run home run last night that looked like it tied the ball game, and it was fun. I was watching live. It was great. Around that same time, the Sixers were trying to put the Spurs away, and they needed overtime to do that and in order to put a little bit more of a solid stance on their first-place reign there in the Eastern Conference, which they did, which was fine, and we'll get to that. But Rhys Hoskins is a home run, and he's rounding the bases. Everyone's excited. Everyone's losing their minds, and this was after Rhys Hoskins made a awful, horrendous play in shallow right field that allowed a run to score from first base when Rhys was playing first, obviously, couldn't field a line drive. Runner scores from first on this play, mostly because Rhys Hoskins lollygagged. Got lost wherever the hell he was in his mind. Don't know where it was. And for some reason, instead of jogging the baseball in, he stops, puts his head down, I guess in disgust that he didn't catch a baseball, a line drive nonetheless, and kind of lofts it over to Nick Maton, who then realizes the Mets are rounding third, trying to score, which they do. Maton can't then get it out of his mitt. Even if he did, the run was going to score anyway. And the Phillies are just looking like a bunch of idiots. Like mental lapse, embarrassing, whatever you want to call it. It was a horrendous play. So then when Rhys Hoskins stepped up to the plate later in that ballgame with an opportunity there in the bottom of the ninth inning to try to tie things up, and then going on to do so, rounding the bases, gets to the dugout, we're all losing our minds. And I thought that ball was maybe a row back, right? Maybe the first row of seats at least. And they show the replay, and wouldn't you know it, it hit off that like iron rail of the top of the fence in right field and bounced back into play. So they rule it a ground rule double, no tie ball game. Phillies are still down a run. Bryce Harper comes up and actually struck out twice because there's no way that other pitch was a ball that was to Bryce Harper. But anyway, Bryce Harper ends up ending the game, and that's all she wrote. But after the game, Joe Girardi was asked about the particular play, and so was Rhys Hoskins, as one would assume. I believe that they made the right call, and I'll show you this in a second, but I believe they made the right call. So am I pissed off only because they took away that joy and excitement of what would have been a game-tying home run from Rhys Hoskins and his 9th home run of the season? Yeah, probably. But I think other people are pissed off because they want to know how you could overturn that when it wasn't conclusive. To me, it was conclusive. The ball did not leave the ballpark. As much as I would have loved to have said, they screwed the Phillies in this regard. Again, I can't. I mean, they screwed them in that they did their job well, if you count that. But bottom line is the ball didn't leave the park. They made the right call. Joe Girardi kind of had that same feeling. But you'll listen to him here. Girardi, I don't think saw the play yet. He says here he was assuming what happened. Here's Joe Girardi post-game.
It's a replay. I mean, that's what the replay system is there for. I mean, obviously it's frustrating it goes against us, but I'm assuming that they were right. I mean, I'm making the assumption. And, I've said all along, the whole idea of replay is to get calls right. It's frustrating because we thought we tied it up, and it's kind of like, it's tough.
Extremely, obviously, and I'll just show you. I put a little loop together for you so you can see this. To me, that is hitting the rail. And if you look at it one more time, I mean, I think you would see the seat move if it was the seat that it hit, which would be great. But I unfortunately think the umpires, for once in this series in particular, made the right call. Reese Hoskins was asked, I believe this is Todd Zalecki of MLB.com, asking Reese about the frustration level that took place, not just from his fielding error earlier, his fielding mistake earlier in the ball game, but also having a 3-run home run that would have tied the game be called back.
Frustrating is that moment for you? You make that defensive play that cost you guys in that inning, and then you think you kind of tied it up. What's that frustration emotions like?
Yeah, it's high. Frustration's high.
I give Reese a lot of credit for not saying a bunch of things that he wanted to say. The camera certainly caught him during the game saying things that he wanted to say. And it's the heat of the moment. And he basically told the umpire the word that starts with F, and I think you can understand what that is. So that was what happened to the Phillies last night. So they lose 2-3 to the Mets after just a slew of bad calls throughout the series. This is one that, although it took a lot of the air out of the balloon, all the air out of the balloon, as a matter of fact, it was one that certainly sucked. So hopefully the Phillies will be able to bounce back from that. But just a bad weekend of baseball overall from the Phillies, unfortunately. And yesterday was kind of the culmination of all of that. So once again, I'll show you this just to drive the point home. That's how close. That's how close to tying the game. Right there. That's how close. Here's how close the Sixers were to not being able to win against the Spurs last night as we continue to talk about some close calls. Ben Simmons was playing a very bad offensive game. Scoring-wise, especially, his assist numbers weren't that good last night. Tobias Harris struggled mightily in the Sixers win over the Spurs last night. They combined for 11 points, Tobias Harris and Ben Simmons. That's not going to get done most nights, folks. Joel Embiid had 34 points last night, too. He had a game high. You didn't have DeMar DeRozan playing in this game. You had a whole bunch of Spurs that weren't playing in this game. Sixers were favored by 10 on DraftKings going into it, and they were really struggling. They were leading by 10 going into the fourth quarter, and then the Spurs really started to hit some shots from the outside. They started to work it in as well. They were getting fouls, they were getting N1s and all that, and they were able to tie this game late, so much so that obviously you needed overtime to win it. But here's how close they were to going into at least another overtime. Ben Simmons following up, which I think it was a Joel Embiid missed shot, but Ben Simmons right there, Johnny on the spot. This is the angle looking in at the basket so you can see the time left in the game ticking off the clock as Ben Simmons goes up to tie this.
Crashes down the stretch. First one to it, absolutely in time.
Maybe 0.2 of a second left on the clock. One more time.
Crashes down the stretch. First one to it, absolutely in time.
Maybe 0.2 of the second left when Ben Simmons gets his hand on the basketball to redirect it back through the hoop. Sixers win the game. They escape San Antonio barely with a win and a sole possession of first place in the Eastern Conference on their way to, I believe it's Chicago, for the next game. It was an ugly game to watch if you were a Sixers fan last night. The turnovers weren't great. Again, Ben Simmons, Tobias Harris didn't have anything going for themselves. Seth Curry had himself a good game, and Joel Embiid, and they were really the ones that propelled the Sixers to a win. And to me, it looked like a team. The Sixers just looked sluggish. And we've talked before about how even the great teams every once in a while have that clunker. Last night, I wouldn't necessarily go in the direction of it was a clunker, but I think Doc Rivers had a great way of putting it after the game, and he put it very simply. Just like it wasn't their night. They just didn't have it. And they were aware of that. The ball movement, it wasn't what it usually is with this team. Tobias Harris, obviously, you're used to seeing him get you at least 20 points every night. That's the type of player he is. But last night, they looked like a team that certainly was taking their opponent for granted. When they didn't have, again, DeMar DeRozan playing for them. I mean, Patty Mills was still playing in the game. But a team that usually had been dominating teams, especially over the last 4 games, couldn't find that special something in this game. All they could find was whatever it would take to win. Just barely, whatever it would take to just eke out a victory and move on to the next one. It looked like a team that was tired, sluggish, out of sync at times last night. And Doc Rivers said as much after the game, just pointing out very simply that this was the type of game the Sixers can't have again as the season winds down. Certainly can't have again going into the playoffs right now when they're looking to now hold on again to the number one overall spot in the Eastern Conference. This is the type of game that they needed to try to avoid. They couldn't, but still they got the win. And that's what we have talked about really all year long with this Sixers team. That game last night is a game that last year's Sixers team loses. That game last night is a game that they just maybe miss going to overtime in, and because of losing, or they allow the Spurs to go on a little bit of a run as soon as overtime starts, and they can't recover from that. That's what we were talking about from last year going into this year. But this Sixers team, they did what they have done throughout a bunch of games this season, which is simply find a way to win, and that's what they did. So you got to be happy at least about that. And the fact that you had two of your best players, two of your starting five, play very subpar for how we're used to seeing them play in Harris and Simmons, and they were still able to win the game. So that was great to see, at least from the Sixers, to do that. And a night of close calls, whether it was the Sixers getting the tip in, and then obviously Rhys Hoskins just almost tying the ball game for the Phillies. And that brings me to the Philadelphia Eagles. Hey, remember that show we did Friday? That was a fun show. Remember that show we did when they drafted Devontae Smith and everyone was excited. Everyone loved Howie, and I was loving Howie, and you were loving Howie, and we're all loving Howie together, and it was like 2017, 2018 all over again. That was a fun show. I don't know what the hell happened between then and now, other than what I only feel like was a whole slew of bad picks. Like, it was like you say, all right, we'll give you exactly who you want in that first round. We'll even have the Eagles trade up past the Cowboys and the Giants, so you sell your soul to the proverbial devil in this case, and then the rest of the draft you're going, huh? What? How many injuries? And he's your second-round pick? Okay, I guess. Oh, and we'll give you some behind-the-scenes turmoil between Tom Donahoe, and Howie Roseman with the fist bump heard round one. I don't have a good feeling about the rest of that draft. I really felt like, all right, well, I guess, and it seemed like this is how most of you fine people felt as well. It felt like they'll give you the one pick, and then after that, it was business as usual by Howie. And here's what I've learned. And this is certainly not breaking news, but we own real estate in Howie Roseman's head, and I'm going to get to that in just a second. But first, let's just show you the highlight, or low light, if you will, that people have been going back to with this little fist bump between Howie and Tom Donahoe.
Someone's unhappy about this pick. Howie's like, what?
I gotta get for you the person that's doing like the play-by-play of that. But basically, as you heard right there, Milton Williams gets taken there in the third round by the Eagles. He's out of La Tech, and it's part of the trade with Carolina. The Eagles were able to get Milton Williams. It looked like at that spot, Tom Donahoe wanted to get at least a cornerback. And that's where my mind was. And wouldn't you know it, a corner went off right off the board in the next pick. And the Eagles going into this draft, if they had one pressing need to try to address in this draft, it would have been cornerback. However, they then do not take a corner until the fourth round. And if you would have told me when they took Zach McPherson, if you would have told me going into this draft that the Eagles were going to take a corner until the fourth round, I would have said you're crazy. At some point, you were going to draft for need, not necessarily for best player available. I believe in the first and the second round, really, you're going to draft, or at least you should be drafting based on best player available. When you start to get third, fourth round, I think that's where you can start thinking a little bit more about need. The Eagles didn't do that till the fourth round, and I wouldn't be nearly as upset if it wasn't for the fact that I believe it was six cornerbacks were taken between their third round pick and their fourth round pick. So the Eagles take Williams with the 73rd overall pick in the third round. And then they take in the fourth round, Zach McPherson, number 123 overall. And in between those two picks, six corners go off the board. So if you would have told me, like, the Eagles weren't going to have there was like no other corners going off the board. There was only one other corner going off the board. I'd be like, oh, well, there's no good value at corner at that spot. So what would the Eagles have done? Well, I'll tell you what they would have done. They would have taken 6 of the other corners that were drafted, including the guy that was taken exactly immediately after Williams was picked. And that's why I would assume Tom Donahoe was upset about. And as Howie goes over to him for the congratulatory fist bump and, hey, we're all together, it didn't look like they were all together in that room. And if it's anybody else, and we'll talk to Dave Zangaro about this in a second, but if it's anybody else, if it's any other front office, this isn't really that big a story. It's something that looks funny. But then when you've had, 2 different stories come out in one offseason about the front office turmoil of the Philadelphia Eagles, then, yeah, this is going to get a lot of conversation. Let's get to the issue at hand, though, when it comes to being in Howie Roseman's head. Howie said something that really jumped out at me, and I got this off Jeff Skversky was kind enough to put this out on the social media, so you can check it out there as well. But this is Howie Roseman talking about drafting Landon Dickerson, who is the player I alluded to, the center with 4 different injuries, out of Alabama, another Bama guy. So Eagles go forever without drafting Bama. Bang, bang, 2 guys right in a row, first 2 picks in this draft. So they take a lineman in Landon Dickerson. They take a lineman, a defensive tackle in Milton Williams. Then later on in the draft, take another defensive tackle, then a defensive end in Teron Jackson in the 6th round. So it seems like it's all linemen all the time. Howie Roseman, going into his press conference, I believe this is his last press conference on Saturday, talked about he's not going to apologize for taking linemen. Here's Howie Roseman.
We're always going to build this football team, and we're going to start with the line of scrimmage. And right or wrong, as long as I'm here, that's going to be the priority. And I think the great things about the 2 guys next to me is that's what they believe too. And you could say it all you want, but it better show in your actions. And so if we have an offensive lineman or defensive lineman sticking out on our board and they're the highest guy, I promise you we're going to take them. And you saw that in the last couple of days. I'm sure there are some people sick and tired of seeing the Philadelphia Eagles take linemen. But you know what? That's how we won a championship, and that's how we're going to win another championship.
Nobody, there might be jokes about taking a lineman in the 1st round or whatever. Nobody is sick of seeing the Eagles take linemen. I think the vast majority of Eagles fans are great football minds in terms of they understand the game. And I know there's a lot of people that always want to rush to the idea of taking linemen because they want to sound smarter than most other people when that's not true. For instance, Devontae Smith was the right pick at where they got him. Nobody's sick of seeing you take linemen. They get that the games are always won and lost in the trenches, right? People are tired of you having god-awful drafts, Howie. That's what people are sick of. And after Devontae Smith, I can't look at one pick and go, that's the guy. And granted, I'm not a college football scout. Most of you aren't either. But after the first pick, and you hear in the 2nd round that they're taking a guy who, yeah, sure, has a phenomenal amount of upside, but then also the downside is he's got 4 injuries in college, hasn't really played a lot, and now he's going to, no doubt, a much tougher version of football in the NFL. It usually doesn't get better at that point. I mean, if Devontae Smith was the size that he was, or size that he is, and had a long history of injuries, yeah, guess what? He ain't going to be a 1st-round pick. And that's where you're going to be swinging for the fences, hopefully in the 2nd round, like they're doing with Dickerson here, get him in the 2nd round with all his injury history. So to me, that's a really tough sell. You've done it before. I know that the immediate comparison that comes to mind is Sidney Jones. What this team did, 1st-round talent, maybe top 10 type of pick, top 15 at least. You get him in the 2nd round, and it didn't work out here in Philadelphia. That's what concerns me now about taking this kid in the 2nd round, is that you obviously still had cornerback needs once again. And they chose to go for somebody that could play the guard position, center position. You took a bunch of offensive linemen last year. And they just try to swing for the fences and really try to cash in, roll the dice, if you will, on someone that's had a lot of injury history. And if he didn't have that injury history, you're talking about a guy that's maybe a top 10 pick in this draft. Hey, look, I cross my fingers and I hope it works out. And I think it was Pro Football Focus actually put out the numbers for Howie Roseman in this front office draft this year. And they have the 7th highest draft value rating. 7th highest. I don't know if that includes a kid that has a lot of injuries, but I'm hoping they're hitting on some of these later round picks. And we'll all be crossing our fingers for that. But right now, I look at this and I just think, wow, after the 1st round, all that excitement we had Friday, it felt like we were going right back to where we have been for so long with Howie Roseman and the Philadelphia Eagles in this front office. And I'm crossing my fingers. Our initial reaction is all wrong about what this Eagles team did in the last 2 days of the draft. I want to tell you about my friend, before we talk to Dave Zangaro on the Zatos Investments guest line, I do want to tell you about my friend Steven Singer, Steven Singer Jewelers. Mother's Day this Sunday, and Steven's got your back with brand new rose color. This thing's gorgeous. You've heard us talking about it for weeks. Sunshine Yellow. The new Sunshine Rose is a brilliant shade of yellow that dazzles with sparkles. It's absolutely gorgeous. His famous gold dip roses dipped and trimmed in 24-karat gold that last a lifetime. Steven always likes to say that he's in the love business, and this past year, we all know how important love is. We really found that out, didn't we? In addition to brightening your loved one's day, Steven wants to put a little sunshine in everyone's day, as a matter of fact. So he's continuing to use a portion of the proceeds sold for each rose to support local restaurants by catering meals for all the incredible nurses, doctors, first responders, and hospital heroes. Go to IHateStevenSinger.com. That's IHateStevenSinger.com and send a Sunshine Gold Dip Rose. This is your last chance for free shipping to arrive in time for Mother's Day. Order by 2 p.m. Eastern Time Wednesday. That's May 5th. And you can also get a great gift, obviously. You cater meals for hospital heroes in our area from our local restaurants. Don't wait for Mother's Day. Mother's Day is just on Sunday, so make sure you order that rose by 2 p.m. this Wednesday to give a great gift to Mom this Mother's Day. You're almost out of time. Steven's famous Gold Dip Roses come with a lifetime guarantee, free personalized gift message, and fast and free shipping. Go to IHateStevenSinger.com right now. That's IHateStevenSinger.com. Right now, the other corner of 8th and Walnut, right in Philadelphia. All right, let's get more of a look here at the Eagles weekend with my friend Dave Zangaro of NBC Sports Philadelphia as he joins us on the Zatos Investments guest line. On the Zatos Investments guest line from NBC Sports Philadelphia, Eagle Eye podcast as well, Mr. Dave Zangaro joins us. Dave, how are you, buddy?
I'm good, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. Now, for me, it's just difficult following the draft, but I don't have deadline every day, every pick that's made. So how are you doing now that it's Monday, recovering from your crazy weekend?
I'm a little tired. I feel like a baby, though, when I complain about my job. If I ever, I'm not one of those, public complainers because people are like, all right, oh, you had to type a little bit on Friday night? It's not I wasn't in a mine shaft, but it's tiring. It's a long few days, long hours, and you don't get much sleep, but it's fun. And I love the draft, man. The draft to me is 3 of the most fun days of the year.
Wow.
And it's because you go into it, you have no idea what's going to happen. There were for each team, the Eagles have 3 guys who really know what they're going to do. Everything else is a smokescreen, or we're guessing, right? But the draft is, you have no, and they can't know what's going to happen before then. So it's almost like a game where you don't know what's going to happen, and it's 3 days long, and it's fun. It's fun, watch these guys you've kind of followed in college end up on NFL teams. And as hokey as it sounds, I still love seeing all those videos of when they get the call. And it's that's their moment. It's really cool. It's so much fun. That doesn't get old, watching these kids and they're kids now or me. It's funny. I started and they were my age almost, but they're 21-year-old kids getting the phone call of their lives. It's really cool. It's fun.
Now, here's something people should know about you, Dave Zangaro, because I know you like the draft. I didn't know that you love the draft, but one thing that I really respect about you, because you have this type of energy that I don't, and you love training camp. You love finding the guy that is the undrafted free agent. The Eagles certainly have enough of those guys right now, but you love finding that guy that could be the next Jason Peters. You love being able to have conversations with all these guys that really aren't supposed to amount to much, but you're you know what? Let me go out there and just have these conversations, because you never know who's going to be the hit.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I got into the business, honestly. It's storytelling, and you want to find the best story. And the best story is from the guys who aren't supposed to make it. The guys who are supposed to make it. I mean, that's not the good story. The good story is the guy who's the undrafted. The Jason Peters is a good story.
Right.
The undrafted tight end who becomes the Hall of Fame left tackle. That's the good story. I miss OTAs. I don't know if we're ever going to get back to having OTAs. That's a loss for me. No one else cares, but I love every minute of OTAs and training camp. I really do.
Wow. God bless. So you're a better man than I am, my friend. I'll tell you that much. And this is why your stuff is so great on NBC Sports Philly, because no stone left unturned, my friend. So on that note, let's just talk about the lead story from this draft, and I think that's obviously Devontae Smith. It seems like after day one, and you have an incredible feature piece coming up here with Devontae Smith as well on NBC Sports Philly and the My Teams app as well, but you have an incredible piece on Devontae Smith. He's obviously the lead. After Thursday night, Eagles fans were feeling pretty good. Now we'll move to how they felt after that later, but Devontae Smith, I feel like it's a home run pick for the Eagles. What say you?
Yeah, I agree. And it's not to say there's no concern or worry about his size. I mean, it's a legitimate fear, right? Because there's never been a guy quite like him. There's never been a guy drafted in the top half of the first round who's as light as him, 166 pounds. Yeah, there's a little bit of a fear there, but seeing what he did at such a high level in the SEC, I mean, he's a special player. And I came into this draft, and the four guys we talked about so much leading into this draft, I kind of thought to myself, if they get one of these four guys, easy, solid pick. And it was Patrick Surtain, J.C. Horn, the two corners, and then it was the Alabama receivers, Jalen Waddle and Devontae Smith. Any of those four, fine picks. And honestly, I'll be honest with you, Smith was at the bottom of that list for me, but that's not to say it's not a great pick, honestly, because I really like Surtain. He was the top of the board for me. When you look at like realistic picks, just because I thought he fits the need, but he's also like a great player, safe pick. And there was no concern about him. J.C. Horn, I feel like, has a super high ceiling. Jalen Waddle, super explosive. But Devontae Smith, he's a good player. Like, you can't argue with the production he had. And it's not just the production, but there's no reason to think he won't go to the NFL and be a good player. And the only, like, literally the only knock on him is the weight. And I get it. Like, I get why that's a concern, but seeing what he did against the best teams in the country for 3 years, he's going to be a good player in the NFL. I really don't have any doubts about it. And honestly, I feel more convinced than I was on Thursday night over the last few days, talking to people for the story I did, from his high school days about his work ethic, but also just talking to people who have been around the Alabama program. I mean, I had some people call me about Alabama because obviously the Eagles' first two picks came from that school, and it's been a long time since they drafted someone right from Alabama. I haven't found one person say a bad thing about him yet. Honestly, not one thing. It's like he's got this like quiet confidence, and a lot of the same things that we talk about Jalen Hurts off the field. Quiet confidence, kind of a leader. I've heard stories about Devontae Smith where he would, he's always so quiet, but when he speaks, people listen. And I think that's kind of the mark of the guy, like the it factor, the guy when you're a quiet person. And then all of a sudden you speak up and everyone goes, oh, all right, we're listening. We're locked in. This guy's talking. He's the guy. And that's the vibe I get from Devontae. Super confident, but not cocky. Not cocky at all. He's not going to tell you how great he is, but he's going to act like he's great. And he's going to want you to know he's great. And we'll see. There's no guarantees, but I felt really good about that pick.
As far as the weight goes, my theory, and maybe I'm just a simpleton here, Dave, but I don't think anyone comes to Philly and gets skinnier. Like, people come to Philly and they only get bigger. Like, that's kind of what we do here. We like to eat in this city.
Yeah, I mean, if I don't think eating's been the problem. I think it's just like genetically, like I've heard his dad is kind of the same build, like just a tall, skinny guy. Maybe his metabolism will slow down a little bit. It happened to me. I didn't want it to happen to me. It happened to me. Maybe it happened to. If I can pass some of that off to him, that'd be great.
There you go.
I'm not too super worried about it, and I don't even like some people. I've talked to people who are like, he needs to bulk up, but I think he can probably play at this weight. I mean, this is the weight he plays at, and you should try maybe to pack on a little bit more muscle. I get why you'd want to do that, but I don't want to change his body composition. He's not like a weakling. He's skinny, but he's strong, and he plays strong. He plays tough. He's great in those contested catch areas. He's not like playing like a super skinny, fragile type of player. That's not him. I mean, he plays tougher. He plays bigger than he is, and the way is it's. I'm not going to completely dismiss that concern, but it's not a reason not to draft him. And the Eagles felt the same way.
All right, no, we are on the same page as far as that goes. I do want to ask you about their second round pick. They obviously went with a center/guard in Dickerson. There has a history of knee issues, I believe it is, and for a lot of people, myself included, I kind of felt weird about taking him in that second round, especially when it's considered to be such a dice roll with his injury history. What did you make of their second round pick?
Yeah, I mean, this is really the most important part of this weekend, I think, because I ultimately believe this is the pick that's going to determine the success or failure of this entire draft class. Because even like if Devontae Smith becomes a Hall of Famer, then okay, you chalk it up. You say, great draft, right? Okay,
yeah, right.
But aside from that, they had the 37th pick. It's a really high pick. And it's not just the ACLs. He had 2 ACLs in college, 2 ankle injuries. So we're talking about 4 of his 5 years, he suffered some sort of significant injury. The player, I like the player. Landon Dickerson is he is a sure thing first round pick without the injuries. Probably top 15 pick. You're talking about one of the best offensive linemen in this draft. And sort of along the same lines as Devontae Smith, I dare anyone to talk to someone at Alabama who has a bad word to say about Landon Dickerson. You won't find them. They're not there. They don't exist. But the risk, it's just such a risk. It's such a risk reward pick. It's boom bust all the way. I mean, I'll be honest, I wouldn't have taken him. If I'm Howie, I can't do it. I just can't do it. Was
he gonna go off the board? Like, was somebody else about to take him? Like that's my big question. There was another team gonna take him?
He would have been a second round pick.
Okay,
he would have been. I don't know if he would have come right off the board. He would have been a second round pick, and the value there isn't crazy, honestly. Because he's a top 15 talent.
Okay.
Top 15 talent, and Howie Roseman's correct that he would not have been there at 37 if not for the injuries. But the Eagles have been burned by this before, and it's a tough thing because they've been burned both ways. They've been burned.
Sidney Jones. Another first round talent that was second round. Was taken in the second round.
Exactly, and it feels I get why there's fear about like the Sidney thing, because we talked about the same things 5 years ago with Sidney, that first round talent would not be there at 43 in that case if not for the injury, and that's the same thing we're saying about Dickerson. And Howie pointed out that there are differences. They don't expect Dickerson to have a redshirt year. They think he's going to be able to play this year if there's a spot for him, which, unless something goes wrong, there won't be. But it's not a redshirt year. That's important. And also the position, right? I mean, we're talking a cornerback with an Achilles where speed is everything. I agree with that assessment. Like, that matters more than the athleticism of an interior lineman. But the risk, there's so much risk with this. And it's to me, it feels like, and I could be wrong about this, it feels like either Dickerson's going to be a Pro Bowl, all-pro type of player or bust because he can't stay on the field. Like, I don't know if there's a middle ground. Maybe there is. Maybe there's a middle ground. There's a third door where the injuries have accumulated and he's just not the same guy anymore. Maybe he plays and he's okay. That's hard for me to believe because he was such a talent. And we've seen even last year. I mean, he came back. That's the thing. I mean, he had the ACL late in the season. The SEC championship game is where he tore the last ACL, and he was playing at a really high level before that. So he came back from one ACL, 2 ankles, and played at a high level. So what's to say he can't do that after adding an ACL onto that? I don't know. But the risk is just, I keep coming back to it. I couldn't have made that pick being Howie Roseman. I couldn't have sat there at 37, saw good players on the board who I know are at least going to play or going to be a part of your team, and then pick a guy with such to me, a low floor, high ceiling.
They didn't take a corner, Dave, and that's exactly what I want to ask you next. They didn't take a corner until the 4th round. And that shocked the heck out of me, to be honest with you. They finally took one, McPherson, in the 4th round. But between the their third round pick, Milton Williams, a defensive lineman, and Zach, is that how you say it? Zach McPherson?
He goes by, he actually is pronounced Zach.
Okay. Interesting.
It's weird, yeah.
All right. So Zach McPherson, they take him in the 4th round, but between those two picks, their 3rd round pick and the 4th round, there was, I believe, 6 cornerbacks to go off the board. So if they were going to take somebody at corner, I thought that would have been a perfect place to do it, where you would have had still some of the best players available right there, also matching up with one of your biggest needs on this team. Were you surprised they waited that long to not take a cornerback?
A little bit. And remember, they had the 84th pick in the 3rd round, where they probably could have taken one, and they used that to trade up to get Devontae Smith. It's interesting, and I'm sure we're going to talk about the Tom Donahoe situation in a minute, but I mean, they could have taken a cornerback there. They could have. But, you look at what they did, and the one thing I'll give them credit for is the lack of a cornerback early at least gives the appearance that they were drafting not based on need, which I fundamentally agree with. I do. You don't reach for need, because that's when you end up with Marcus Smith. That's where you're like, we need a defensive end. This is the next best guy. Let's take Marcus Smith. You don't do that. My devil's advocate thing here is you had all these picks, right? And you ended up trading a couple. You got a 5th round. You had all this ammo. You could have traded into a spot where the value lined up with where you could have picked to get a cornerback.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe we'll never, they say Zach McPherson, they thought about trading back up into the 3rd round. Who knows? I mean, if they thought about trading up into the 3rd round and they had all these picks, they waited until 123 to pick him in the 4th round. That seems strange to me. Yeah. They were hoping that he just fell to it. That seems strange.
Yeah, I don't believe it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's fair to be skeptical there. And that's not to take away anything from Milton Williams, who I love that pick, actually. I really like Milton Williams. He's a dynamic interior lineman, a great penetrator, an athletic freak. I mean, talk about super tester. I like that pick. I get why people are looking at this saying, you need a cornerback, and you even waited till the 4th round. I think what happened was that the value didn't line up for them, and they didn't trade up to get the value. So they're sitting there at 37, and they think, well, Dickerson's clearly our best player. It's pretty obvious that Asante Samuel Jr. wasn't where he needed to be in their evaluation to take him there. Kelvin Joseph, who was another guy, the cornerback from Kentucky, who I like, had some character stuff. So maybe he was lower on their board or off their board. I don't know. But it seemed pretty clear that the value didn't line up to where they were picking, and that's why they didn't do it. Of course, you can always move. I mean, you moved for other guys. Ultimately, though, I'm not super concerned. Overall, I like the philosophy where you're not forcing things to take positions you need. And you look at, 2 of their first 3 picks are guys who should not start this year. And you can look at that as a positive or a negative. The negative is obviously you're wasting potentially one of their 4 years of control on their rookie contract. The positive is that you can say, hey, they got the best player available. They weren't reaching for a position just because they need to plug a guy in there. That's what free agency is for.
Certainly. Speaking with Dave Zangaro, NBC Sports Philadelphia, also on My Team's app. Great piece on Devontae Smith and his background. You can check that out, of course, at NBCSportsPhiladelphia.com. You did mention Tom Donahoe. My first thought was, oh, come on. There's going to be disagreements in the draft room. It's not all puppy dogs and ice cream, right? But, of course, because it's the Eagles front office, it's the Eagles draft room that's been well documented as to how crazy that's been and the turmoil that's gone on there. It's picked up a lot more steam. What did you make of the whole Tom Donahoe thing?
Bad luck.
Yeah, okay.
More than anything, bad luck. For an organization where we spent so much of this offseason talking about dysfunction, one of my big stories going into the draft was their need to get on the same page. Scouting, coaching, analytics, front office, everyone needs to kind of pull in the same direction. That's not to say there won't be disagreements, because there will be. And I actually thought how we handled the question about that situation really well. He admitted that, yeah, like Tom wanted a different player, and scouts or people in the scouting world, like they get locked in on guys and they really like them. They spend a lot of time researching and they fall in love with guys. And I get that. It's just a bad luck. I mean, and it's unfortunate for them that it got caught on camera because these things happen. Not normally on a national broadcast in front of the entire world. A few weeks after a pretty big story comes out about the dysfunction in your front office, including the scouting department. I mean, it's not a good look. And look, I haven't known Tom Donahoe as long as others, but I've known him, for the last 6 years or so. He's not the type of guy to just go, yeah, sure, you did what you did. Like he's opinionated. He's an old school football guy. He's been a GM twice in this league. He's been in the scouting world for like 50 years. Almost literally, I think like 50 years. And so he's not going to just be like, yeah, great pick. But what I wanted to bring up was Jonathan Gannon, and the Eagles had a little damage control. They posted a video, the other angle where you can't see Tom Donahoe, and it showed Jonathan Gannon's excitement about the pick. And that's important. And look, I get that it's a little propaganda. It has that feel when the team puts it out, but the fact that their defensive coordinator was so excited about that pick, and their defensive coordinator, by the way, a former defensive backs coach, former scout. I mean, he has a lot of those things. If he's that excited about the pick, I think overall the team was happy about Milton Williams. And you can, like, I understand Tom Donahoe's annoyance there. I mean, there was a cornerback who was pretty good, and you could have had him. And I will say this: the Eagles traded back 3 spots, and if they and they got the 191st pick in the draft, which is a 6th-round pick. Let me put it this way: if they had 3 players there that were equal, super equal, then the trade's fine. But if they had that cornerback even a smidge above Milton Williams, then it was not worth trading back.
Okay.
For a 6th-round pick. If you have your guy in the 3rd round, who the hell cares about a 6th-round pick? You get the guy. And I'm not saying that's the case. I think they are legitimately excited about Milton Williams, who, like I said, physical freak. But that's my one fear, is that Howie obviously likes to maximize value in the draft, and you just can't sacrifice that and lose out on a player you really want in the 3rd round. And if that's what happened, then it's a mistake. If they had those guys honestly equal, then I'm fine with it.
Yeah, I forget the guy's name that went right after Williams. Milton went there, but I know he was Canadian, so it would not have worked out. Just the bottom line.
He was not a fireman, though. Are you talking about? The UCF corner was the guy who I think was the target for Tom Donahoe. There was another defensive tackle, but I think if it was a defensive tackle, Milton Williams was their guy.
Yeah, okay, that makes more sense. Last thing for you here, Dave, and again, check out all Dave's stuff on NBCSportsPhiladelphia.com. If you do have to look at the draft, bird's eye view, eagle eye view, if you will, right? If you have to look at it from afar, good feeling, bad feeling about this Eagles draft class?
Skeptical.
Okay.
I like some of the picks. We didn't mention him yet. Kenneth Gainwell, or Kenny Gainwell as he prefers. I like that pick.
Okay.
He was a guy who I thought made sense for them earlier. When I put together a list of potential picks for the 4th round, he was there. So I like the value. I like what he can do in that offense. He was like some of these guys were like easy to peg to the Eagles because of what you knew about the schemes you think they're going to run. Easy one there. I think that's a great pick.
All right. Easy enough.
Love the 1st round pick. Like the 3rd. This whole draft comes down to the 2nd rounder.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a valuable pick. Number 37. And you took a guy who could be great, could not play very long, could not. Who knows? Maybe he'll never play. Like that's, to me, it's such a scary pick. And in a lot of ways, it's comparable to the 2017 draft when they took Sidney Jones. Because think back to that draft, which is a pretty bad draft, right? I mean, Sidney was awful. Rasul was what he was. Donnell Pumphrey, they traded up for to try to get him. Derek Barnett's been okay. And you look at that draft, you think that was a bad draft. But if Sydney worked out, that's a good draft.
Yeah, you got your value there in the second round for a guy that had again that first round talent.
Exactly. And like Derek Barnett, by the way, like solid player, right? Not a great player, solid player. If you got a first round pick in the second round, all of a sudden that draft looks better. And that's the way, in a lot of ways, I look at this draft. It's like if Landon Dickerson becomes a stud, easy, this is a good draft. But we'll have to see, and I'm skeptical.
Well, Dave, if I had to evaluate the first pick, Devontae Smith, I would describe it as, and maybe you can follow me on this, it might be too difficult, but I would describe it as a
Oh, man, I really stared the camera down there, didn't I? That was intimidating, huh?
For those that didn't pick up on it, I would describe it as a slam dunk. That's what I would do.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm excited to see him play. There's something about him, man. And I like the idea of how he'll be used in Sirianni's offense. Kind of a long strider, unique player, just a really unique player. It's tough to get a comp on him. I've heard people say Marvin Harrison, and it's funny. We always compare these guys to like Hall of Famers, you know. But the idea of him in this offense. I'm just going here.
All right, go for it. What do you got?
Yeah, sorry, I'm taking up your time here.
No.
Jacoby Stevens, who they drafted in the 6th round, was asked about Devontae, and he played at LSU, and he gave such a great answer about how good Devontae was and how tough he was to cover. And the one thing he said about him, which I loved so much that I then asked Nick Sirianni about it, was he said he makes every route look the same. And that sounds like something like, all right, he makes it, but that is such a big deal for a college player, a guy who's relatively young, to understand, because it's tough because it's really like, it's a little inside baseball here, but like that's a big part, and it shows how wise he is, the football IQ, that he's that technically proficient that he's doing those things already in college. Normally that's something like some guys do it in college, and you have to kind of teach them a little bit, like that's nuance of the receiver position that they learn in the NFL a lot of times. And the fact that he's already that good at it in college, it means a lot. And I know it means a lot to Nick Sirianni, who has that receiver background. Devontae Smith there's not like one trait of his that blows you away, right? He's obviously not big. He's not a burner. He's not like Waddle, right? He's not that super explosive.
Right.
There's nothing that he does that's like super special.
I will say one thing that really does blow me away is, and I hate the term catch radius, but for a guy with that frame, he seems to get to everything.
He's long. He is long. And people talk about him being small. He's not small. He's skinny. He's long. And length is important. And the one thing I think he does better than anything else is great hands. He can catch the football, which is a pretty important part of being a receiver. But my point is, like, when you start to check those boxes, right? He does maybe there's nothing, like there's not like one trait that blows you away. But you have this, you're fast enough, you're strong enough, you're smart enough, you're savvy. Like once you start adding all those boxes together, all of a sudden you're talking about a great player. And I had someone compare him the other day, and the only reason someone compared him to this player was because I covered him many years ago, but DeAndre Hopkins. And I like that comparison. And I'm not saying it's going to be DeAndre Hopkins, but the idea that like when Nuke came out, there wasn't like one thing that you thought that's his thing, except for the great hands, and Devontae has the same hand. Well, not same hands, but he has good hands. And I see a lot of that. I just see like a player that there's no reason he shouldn't be very good in the NFL. So I think you can feel pretty sound and safe about him.
I'm in. There was the one name that I really wanted that I thought would be there when they were going to pick at 12, and if they had to move up, they were going to. I thought once you saw Horn go off the board, Once you saw Surtain go off the board, and obviously Waddle was way off the board by then, I thought the Eagles made a great move in going up to make sure that they got their guy. Dave Zangaro, make sure you check out all Dave Zangaro stuff on NBC Sports Philadelphia, Eagle Eye Podcast, as well as the My Teams app. Dave, thank you so much for coming on, man. I really appreciate it. Look to catch up with you again soon.
Thanks, buddy. Appreciate it.
Hey, any more office highlight dunking, send my way. I'll use it in every interview we do.
No, will do.
Dave Zangaro joining us on the Zatos Investments guest line. You're the man, brother. Always good catching up with Dave Zangaro, my old friend there at NBC Sports Philadelphia. Make sure you check out a great piece on, we were referencing it obviously during the interview, on Devontae Smith. A lot of background stuff. Dave, as he did say, is a storyteller, and it's definitely it's well worth reading there on NBCSportsPhiladelphia.com. Do want to tell you about my friends at DraftKings before we get into our morning rush and before we get into our social media check-in and our big bets, which is brought to you by DraftKings. I took a hit yesterday. Took a hit last night. Doesn't count towards the show, because I didn't make the prediction on the show. However, anyway, I'll get into that more in our big bet segment, including a bet I like tonight, because I'll just say this. Sounds like some runs. That's my hint. Sounds like some runs for our big bet segment today. First and foremost, check out our friends over at Philadelphia Sports Nation, a local Philadelphia sports site covering your favorite teams across blogs and social media. PHLSportsNation.com, Philadelphia Sports Nation, enhancing your Philadelphia sports fan experience. Big bets coming up in a minute here, brought to you by DraftKings and DraftKings Sportsbook, America's top-rated sportsbook app. Get in on all the action at DraftKings Sportsbook. How about Zatos Investments? Love my friends over there at Zatos Investments. People are hitting me up asking me about Zatos Investments. Well, I'll tell you what you can do. You can hit them up for yourself at info@ZatosInvestments.com. That's info@ZatosInvestments.com. Or you could simply visit ZatosInvestments.com. They are an up-and-coming luxury real estate and development and investment company in the Philadelphia area. They design and develop top-of-the-line custom homes all around the city, ranging from small single-family rehabs to ground-up new construction and townhomes and condo buildings. Zatos works closely with their private investor base to provide them with substantial returns on their investment, ranging from 20 to 40%. These guys, like I said, are crushing into the Philadelphia real estate game. Check them out for yourselves, and also how you can, too, invest in Zatos Investments. Go to info@ZatosInvestments.com or simply log on to ZatosInvestments.com. How about Steak and Maine? They've been rated #1 for steaks in America by the Travel Channel and the Cooking Channel. Check it out for yourself at steakandmaine.com. They got so much going on there in the heart of Northeast Maryland. Whether you dine in a more upscale steakhouse or casual bar and patio, you'll be enjoying the highest quality of prime meats, fresh seafood, world-class oyster bar, and freshly prepared sushi. Who doesn't love a little sushi? I love a little sushi, right? All that and an extensive wine list, including their own Cavada Cellars wines. Open every day from lunch or for lunch, dinner, and Sunday brunch. Steakandmaine.com. Make sure you check them out of the heart of Northeast Maryland. And also FanUp. Been always telling you about the FanUp app. We had some great back and forth. People want to know a lot of stuff from FanUp. For our FanUp 5 today, of all the questions that we got in on our social media account with all the great people at FanUp. A lot of fans very curious. We'll also address that in our the social media check-in segment as well. All the people that wanted to know some different things about the Philadelphia sports scene as we tweeted out over the weekend, and we'll make sure we hit a couple of those coming up in just a second here. Also, you can check out all the great stuff FanUp is offering right now. If you just go to the App Store, download the FanUp app, and get 2,000 bonus points right out of the gate. How about that? Go to the App Store, download the FanUp app, use promo code FANUP, and get 2,000 bonus points right away. You can win some great brand prizes. You can win cash. You can rise on their leaderboard, squad up with your friends, because the days of playing fantasy sports alone are over. Check it out. May the best fan win at FanUp. Let's jump in right now to our social media check-in, brought to you by Steak and Maine and steakandmaine.com. I see the comments are just off the charts right now, ladies and gentlemen. Appreciate it. Sean's checking in saying Howie still sucks. LOL. Would be evident. Would be evident. But like Dave said, if Devontae Smith is just a freak, then this is a great draft. And I mentioned earlier, I think it was Pro Football Focus put out the number that the Eagles have the 7th best draft value in this draft. 7th best. Top 7. We usually have Howie down there around the bottom 7, but they have him in the top 7, so we'll see how that pans out. Give us a grade, Farzy. That's what Rob said. That was from Sean. Then Rob says, give us a grade, Farzy. If I have to give a grade on this Eagles draft, it'd still be a B-. That'd be my grade. simply because they got the guy I really wanted. And that first round pick is huge. I can't evaluate for you really after the fourth round. I can tell you this. I didn't like the pick in the second round. I think it's weird to take an injury risk at that spot, especially where they're going to take him. I don't like the fact that you had two other corners go in that second round within, I think, 6 picks of Dickerson. So you had Kelvin go. Kelvin, blanking on his name. Kelvin Joseph. You had Kelvin Joseph go, and then you had Asante Samuel Jr. go a couple of picks later, also in that second round. Would have much rather loved to have seen that. Would have much rather seen that than roll the dice on an offensive lineman. And then they didn't take a quarterback in this draft. I know they signed a quarterback later in the draft. Excuse me, in the undrafted quarterback they took, technically out of Georgia, but he never played at Georgia. Jamie Newsome, I think it is. Never played at Georgia. Played at Wake Forest for 3 years. Opted out his final year due to COVID. He's 6'4". I know that. He's a big guy. He can create with his legs. He had over almost 570 yards, I think it was, of rushing yards while he was at Wake Forest in his junior year, it would have been. But yeah, I was shocked they didn't take a corner until fourth round, and I was shocked they didn't take a quarterback at all. I thought you would at least taken a flyer on a younger quarterback, especially with Joe Flacco being here, and obviously a younger quarterback in Jalen Hurts. But I guess they didn't want to go that way. It still makes it's still weird. Ben Simmons. This is Nick's checking in saying Ben can never make anything easy. That's very true. But he won the game for you. Probably the right call, but still sucks. Laugh out loud. Oh, that's Matt. Matt's checking in saying about the Reese Hoskins home run. I think it was the right call. Give it to you one more time. Here it is. Yeah. To me, that hits the rail, right? I was waiting for the moment that we wait for whenever we think a ball is just barely going to make it around the foul pole. You wait for that ball to disappear because obviously the foul pole is going to be blocking the view of the ball. That didn't happen. The rail never blocked the view of the ball. Ergo, not a home run. Max checking in how he got drunk on the job. I don't know if that happened. Rob's checking in inches, Farzy. Inches. Yes, with the tenths of a second with Ben Simmons. Inches with Reese Hoskins. You're absolutely right. Mally's checking in. Mally, thank God. I don't want to be worried about you. I know you were off last week, but hey, good to have you back. I always love these comparisons. Howie drafted like a bad wet dream, started off good, and then then somebody woke him up. I was actually on a Zoom conference, if you will, for a local college. I'll just say that. And one of the people on the Zoom used that same analogy with the wet dream thing. And I was like, appropriate or inappropriate? I'll let you tell me in the comments there. I was like, huh? Wait, we can. All right, whatever. What else do we have here? Brett, so unaware. Yeah, Howie is unaware. That is for sure. Craig, Mark, why didn't we draft a quarterback? I don't know. I can't tell you why they didn't draft a quarterback. Again, I'm shocked they didn't take a corner until the fourth round. I'm shocked they didn't take a quarterback at all in this draft. I didn't expect them to take, what was it, Trask? Is that the kid out of Florida that went late in the second round? I didn't expect them to take him. I thought that would have been too high. And then you would have Jalen Hurts. Get what I'm saying there? Taking a quarterback in the second round when you thought you had your quarterback already, kind of what they did last year. And coming up, we'll let you hear what Sal Paolantonio had to say about that in just a second. But that was our social media check-in brought to you by our friends at Steak and Maine and steakandmaine.com. And as promised, I did throw this question out there yesterday on social media by our friends at FanUp there, just in regards to what did you guys still want to know about the Philadelphia Eagles and what they got going forward here. DJ checking in saying, will the GM and head coach make it to next offseason? Yes. If there's anything about Jeffrey Lurie, he gives his guys a chance unless they make him feel like he doesn't own the team anymore. And the only guy that did that was Chip Kelly, and he was gone here after still 3 seasons. So it's a crazy thing. What else do we have here? Who are we taking in the top 5 next year? Jim, it's a good question. I don't know. But you have 3 first-round picks still, so you can really pretty much take whoever you want. That was just some of the things that came in there, brought to you by FanUp with our FanUp 5. How about this? Our Morning Rush brought to you by Sky Motorcars and SkyMotorcars.com. Let's get the news and notes out of the way real quick. 76ers at the Bulls tonight, 9 p.m. Flyers host the Penguins tonight at the Wells Fargo Center at 7 p.m. Phillies and Brewers start a 4-game series in South Philly. Brewers come to town 17-11 on the season. Vince Velasquez on the hill against Hausner tonight. That's part of my big bet segment. We'll get that a little bit more to you coming up in a second here. Two things I didn't weigh in on the Phillies earlier. One, Jose Alvarado. So he gets suspended 3 games for jawing at the Mets. Meanwhile, Bryce Harper gets hit in the face by a pitch, and then the next batter gets hit in the ribs, and there's no suspension. But Jose Alvarado yelled things at the Mets, and he gets a 3-game suspension? And because the guys got off their asses and walked on the field? Oh, bench is cleared. He incited it. 3-game suspension. Come on. I can't not do a show today and not at least mention how just egregious, how absolutely egregious that is. Bush League by Major League Baseball. Bush League, Major League Baseball on Saturday when Andrew McCutchen was called out of the base path as he clearly defined his own base path and never deviated from it. Just how awful officiating, awful umpiring over the weekend. And the unfortunate thing, the one call they got right was the one that screwed the Phillies the most, bastards. Anyway, that's a little bit scoozy. Sal Palantonio checked in yesterday about the Eagles draft, and I want to make sure you guys hear this. Actually, this is from today. Sal Pal putting this out, talking about the Eagles draft, and he's calling the 2021 Eagles draft the 2020 do-over. Here's Sal Pal on his take on the Eagles draft.
Calling this Eagles draft the do-over draft. Remember last April? They drafted Jalen. Calling this Eagles draft the do-over draft. Remember?
Maybe not. He calls it a do-over. There you go. That's the first. It actually didn't play. I went to hit it, and it didn't play. It did play? It did not play. Men's and men's.
Calling this Eagles draft the do-over draft. Remember last April? They drafted Jalen Hurts in the 2nd round. That angered Carson Wentz. The team imploded. So this year, they even went so far as to send a 3rd-round pick to the dreaded division rival Dallas Cowboys to move up in the 1st round to get Devontae Smith, the wide receiver and Heisman winner, who was Jalen Hurts' teammate at Alabama. And in the 2nd round, they took a huge gamble on Landon Dickerson, the center at Alabama for Jalen Hurts, who 5 months ago tore his knee and may not be available for training camp. So despite what the head coach says, this team is all in on Jalen Hurts. And it looks like Howie Roseman and Jeffrey Lurie learned their lesson the hard way.
Sal Palantonio to do-over, basically, right there. I don't know what that technical thing was. That's a first, though. That's a first. So I want to make sure I give you a Sal Pal's take on all that and more. How about this? 2 quick things also here in the Morning Rush. The first thing is Max Scherzer of the Nationals pitched a complete game, 9 strikeouts, I believe it was. Max Scherzer went out there and just dominated. And then rushed off the mound. 2-hour and 37-minute game. 2-hour and 37-minute game. Rushed off the mound to go to the hospital for the birth of their 3rd kid, him and his wife. How incredible is that? I want to tell you this. For anyone that wants to go to Italy anytime soon, and you're a sports fan, I don't know if you've ever heard of the Colosseum, but apparently they're redoing the Colosseum floor in Rome so that now tourists can walk on the middle of the Colosseum floor and actually look up at the stands, if you will, of the Coliseum. How incredible is that? That'll be ready for you in about 2 years. They're going to have that ready, so that's exciting. That was the Morning Rush, brought to you by Sky Motor Cars and SkyMotorCars.com. Time for our big bets. Oh, one thing I forgot. How could I forget this? In our Morning Rush segment, back to that. Boom. Went to the Sixers game Friday night with my buddy Bennett. I mentioned him on the show before. He got a couple of tickets. He actually got the season tickets. How about that? And he goes, hey, you want to go to the game? I'm like, you're damn right I do. I know a lot of people have compared it to the process era Sixers and not having a lot of people there. I didn't find it anything like that. And yes, I did go to games during the process. I didn't find anything like that. It was eerie. There was definitely an eeriness to showing up, and I tweeted out a couple of pictures about 5 minutes before tip-off. And in the actual arena watching the game, it still feels weird. It's great to watch them. You feel like you're getting you feel like you're at a special event that you paid extra for, like special access, because there's a little bit more interaction, you feel like, with the fans, because they can look right at you, and it's easier to know they're looking right at you because there's so many seats between you and the next people. But it's a crazy thing in that regard. Definitely eerie walking around the Wells Fargo Center, especially right before the game when like nobody was there. I got my stadium nachos for the first time in a long time, and that was great. But it was definitely weird. Halftime, not as weird because everyone's there by that point. And like when you're walking around the bowels of the stadium, for instance, the VOM, if you will, it was cool. It was weird. It was good to see all those people back together. But definitely in the early goings of it, odd. But still, loved it. I thought the Wells Fargo Center, let me say this, did a phenomenal job with all things CDC guidelines, taking care of people, wiping things down, all that. Phenomenal job, Wells Fargo Center. Credit to you for running a great program, obviously. That right there is our Morning Rush, brought to you by Sky Motor Cars and SkyMotorCars.com. Big bets. You got Vinny Velo on the hill tonight against Halster of the Milwaukee Brewers. Sounds like some runs. Vince Velasquez actually done okay as a starter, but I don't think that lasts very long. The over-under on runs tonight is 9. I am going over on DraftKings. That's my big bet, over 9 runs scored in the Phillies-Brewers game tonight. Thanks for watching, everybody. My thanks to Jim Hyden, who produced the program. This is a Buzz Sports and Entertainment production. Of course, tomorrow we'll be joined by Hugh Lamont Douglas III for a fine Tuesday. Have a great rest of the day, everybody. Be back with you tomorrow. Take it easy, everyone.